there's something in the genes, perhaps. Yeah.
Maybe, maybe. But I love exploring these stories with entrepreneurs because to me, it's the hardest part of the journey. When you're looking, you're trying to figure out, am I crazy? Does, are they right? Should I only set out the 25 chairs? And I feel like the best founders are the ones that say, absolutely not. No, set out those 50 chairs. And, people will come around that eventually. But if that leader doesn't have that conviction, um, you know, I think it says, a lot about that leader. That you need that conviction at the beginning. So, well, welcome to 50 Chairs, Daniel and Mark. Super excited to have you on today. We were just talking about just kind of the origins of the 50 Chairs story and the podcast and the things that we aspire to do through this work. Um, Mark and Daniel, you guys have had a extraordinary journey in the car industry. When I was looking at the list of places that you've worked previously, from Lucid, BYD, Polestar, Tesla, you guys have seen the electric car industry and really contributed to that along the way. No shortage of credentials. Um, so I want to talk about a little bit, and we can go kind of how all of that led to this, but I want to talk about the moment where you first thought, hey, everybody else is missing something. We've worked for all of these giant car companies. We're going to go out and we're going to create our own electric vehicle. Walk me through that moment. What was the genesis of it? And, who was the first person you told after the idea popped into your head?
And if you don't mind, I'll jump in quickly on that one, because I think, Gary, your story you were telling us there about the whole 50 chairs piece and where that comes from, maybe that's part of this origin story as well in some regard, because it comes down to risk. Anyone that hasn't heard your story, by the way, definitely, if there's a way of them listening to you talk about that again, they should hear it, because I think what it speaks to really for us is risk. That actually your father stood up there doing what he was doing week in, week out. I don't know whether or not it was because he had strong belief or he didn't see the risk in it. So when I hear people say, you're doing something risky, or when someone jumps out of a plane perhaps and does some skydiving, it usually isn't because someone is way braver than you are or anybody else. It's their perception of risk. And I think for Daniel and I, the perception of risk in what we're doing is that there really isn't one. It has to be done. I'm sure from the outside world, creating an electric sports car company does look damn crazy and hugely risk taking. But for us, actually, it's, you've spoken about our history there. We know the process. We've done this a number of times before. And then when it comes to the vehicle, the supply chain, the history, the talent that exists, especially in the UK, to go and do these things. You put the right people in a room, you give them the right resource, out pops something really incredible. So for us, we probably, we're not seeing that risk. And that's why we're willing to do this, because it needs to be done.
Daniel.
I think there is that, but I think, you're who you are fundamentally, and what drives you, what makes you get out of bed in the morning is different for everyone. I think some people love consistency. They love planning ahead and having stability. And that's the most important thing for them, that makes them feel comfortable. I think you have to be wired to a point where that isn't the most important thing to embark on this. I think there's a risk perception, but for me, it's more having a regret that you had the opportunity to do it and you never did it, right? And I qualify that with having launched multiple car companies. We know how to, we have the ability and knew we had the ability to do it when we embarked on it, right? So if at that point, we had taken a decision, let's go become VPs at Tesla and Lucid and order loads of people around and have really good salaries, we would have known that there was a point where we could have done our own thing. And in the future, I would always be looking back at I've got a friend, he says, what would old Daniel do? And what would young Daniel say about your choice you're making?
Yeah.
old Daniel always look back at Daniel who made that decision and say, what if? And I think you can't live, if you know you're going to have that, and then you choose to do it and you get to that point, you're like, well, I chose not to for these reasons, but I wouldn't want to live with regrets on it. You know, there's a risk side to it, but we can always go and work in big car companies and do what we did before. But there's maybe only a small point in time where you have a really great bunch of people who know how to do this that you want to do it with, and you choose to do it, you know?
So what was that? I mean, the risk profile for a car company from the outside world seems pretty heavy. You know, I was listening to Elon Musk talk about, you know, the entrenched models of, you know, basically the way that the market works. The reason it's so hard for new car companies to start is it's a services model. So you sell the cars at a, you know, basically at margin, at cost, and then, you know, 80% of your fleet needs services and you can sell parts. And that's why new entrants are so difficult unless you have a compelling enough car that people are willing to pay a premium above the margins and you can actually make money at that. Now, I know nothing about the car industry, but to me, that sounds like it favors big companies who've been there a long time. And if you look at the world, you know, it seems like the same brands have been doing the same things forever. What did you learn inside of those companies that said, actually, there's something missing in the market that we are uniquely positioned to go out there and do. And then, did you guys meet while at these companies?
Yeah, we basically had some sort of corporate marriage. It feels for the last 10 or so years, Daniel, haven't we? We've done some other entrepreneurial work together in between as well. So we also launched a company in London that was about putting as many EVs on the road for private hire drivers as possible. And I think that business started in much the same way as Longbow did, which is there is a lot of passion for what we do. Clearly, we wouldn't have joined Tesla back way when you know electric cars certainly weren't sexy. Most people couldn't even pronounce Tesla; it was Tesla or something else. And Daniel, I'm not sure about your family and friends, but mine was certainly all telling me that I was crazy to join an electric car company rather than going into a nice job in Formula One. That was the other option at the time. But both of those things, the private hire business in London, putting EVs on the road, and Longbow, really, really passionate, but also built on a strong spreadsheet. So there's a really dull spreadsheet that sits behind all this that makes sense of those points you just made, Gary. And you're absolutely right. If we were to approach this in the same way as all of those big companies have for the last 100+ years, when you look at someone like Daimler Mercedes, absolutely. It's hugely capital intensive and you will fail. I think there is enough of a graveyard of small car companies out there to prove exactly what we're saying. And that's why it's a different approach that's required as well. We don't think that actually you would even build a car company today the way that Tesla built it 15, 20 years ago. There are so many things that you would and should do differently that we have learned over that time that we're now putting into what we're doing today.
So
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
mean, Elon had to find out those problems, right? But he sat so many layers away that he doesn't actually know the problems, right? So he may know what someone is willing to tell him who doesn't want to get fired. That's what he hears, right? So there's a layer within any company. It's kind of like the truth and power. You pick one, right? You can't have both. He has lots of power.
Yeah.
So what does that say about truth? The truth lives at another layer in most organizations, and that's the layer we were in. If that's Lucid, if that's Tesla, if it's Uber, if it's other places. And if you're listening and paying attention and you're committed to trying to drive forward the objective, which is a better company, happier customers, better cars, more money, you know what's going wrong, and you're feeling it, right? And you are not empowered and don't have the ability to affect the changes. That company needs to be successful, if that's Lucid or if it's Tesla. So we just take that and start our own company with it, right? We're accountable to each other and our shareholders and our customers. We know what was wrong in those companies. Most people in those companies know what's going wrong. They're not empowered to change it. And those empowered don't want to listen to truth, right? So now we have both. We have the benefit of previous truth and now the power to put that into play. And there are, in every possible area you can imagine, there are things you can do to change how a car company operates.
Well, I really want to. You're tempting me with this truth and power concept, Daniel. It's interesting because having investors, I think you met one of my previous investors. There is this dichotomy between people who have massive amount of wealth and people that want to kind of tell them things. But the people who are doing the work know all of the problems, and that's an interesting, you positioned it as knowing the problem, but not having agency to do anything about it. And then, saying, hey, actually, I do have agency. My agency is to go do this myself and build my own car company. So what were those lessons that you learned? Like, what did you see in those companies, and that you can share that wasn't working, that you're like, "Hey, if we could do this ourselves, we could fix some of these problems."
I'll just start with one, is how often and how well you communicate with customers, right? Like a customer in an early company is someone to nurture and work with and to be transparent with, as early as you can for as long as you can, because they're on the journey with you. And early at Tesla, that's exactly what happened. If you and thankfully for me, most people don't think Tesla existed before 2015, but I was there in 2010, 2012. There was a forum, a huge forum of everyone who wanted a Model S. All the feedback came to there. Elon was on the forum, loads of blog posts. Go look at some of the earlier Tesla blog posts. And you were there, Mark, right? The launch of the first studio the second store in the UK. And Elon, there was a customer in the front row. He was like, hey, customers have been part of the journey, Elon. Where should we give feedback? He's like, fully agree. Customers are so important. Email feedback at Tesla. Wait, is that an email address yet? No. Okay. Well, wait until tomorrow. Then email customer feedback at teslamotors.com.
Yeah.
Right. That's how committed the company was at the time to customer journey. When I rejoined as employee 33,000, couldn't care less. Right. Literally the decision points were, will doing this stop a customer taking delivery? So it was almost asking, how far can you push a customer before they reject a delivery of a transaction, was the decision-making point. And that's when the company's dead, right? I could have called the decline of Tesla when I saw that happening, because all money flows from them, right? If you don't care about them, then you're dead.
So they stopped listening to the customer.
That didn't matter anymore. It wasn't the quantum, right? The quantum is how much would a customer accept before they are so annoyed that they stop taking delivery of my product. Imagine that as a decision-making point.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I own a Tesla, so now I feel.
How was your delivery experience?
Actually, I
pick up at a big lot?
wrote to them.
Yes.
I wrote to them because it was so horrible. I said, there's so many things they can do right, but that delivery process was just atrocious. And it made me feel like a cow, like I was cattle. There were just so many people coming in, and I was like, gosh, this is horrible. It was a horrible experience. So how are you taking that and saying, okay, if that was the, one of the problems that you guys first saw, and I think it's interesting. I think as companies grow and scale, that becomes harder and harder for the organization to keep true to that original premise. It feels like, hey, when you're small, you have to listen, you want that feedback, and then you grow and you think you got it covered. How are you guys doing things differently at Longbow? By the way, I do want to explore that idea, the Longbow name. I know there's a story there behind it, but how are you taking that idea of listening to the customer and saying that we're going to keep that core to Longbow, whether we, have 100 cars or 100 million cars, that's going to be core to what we do.
Mark, you've literally listened to customers, right?
Yeah, Gary, there is definitely a story, a reason, or something we find at least a little bit funny behind every decision made at Longbow. So yes, we can dig into the name. But look, we were really lucky, speaking to Daniel's point, on our board. First of all, we run off of a number of principles. I think we're at about 27 or so now. They're published, they're online, people can go and read them. And they are all of the core principles upon which we have built Longbow, most of which have been based on experience that we've had, good and bad, over the years, that now helps us make decisions as we go through building the company. One of them is that number 10, in fact, is you can't get too much advice, certainly good advice. And that was why it's really important for us to have a very strong board join the team. So on our board, we were really lucky to have people like Mike Fluitt, who was the former CEO of McLaren Automotive. He built that pretty much from zero through until the 2020s. Michael van der Sande, who's led Aston Martin, Alpine, Jaguar, super, super smart people, and Dan Barmer, who's the former CEO of Lotus as well. So I think Daniel calls them the three horsemen of the apocalypse. I think they're the holy trinity of board advisors for us, at least. But it's like super smart people that have been through, purely because of their seniority and time on the planet, they have seen a huge amount as well. So we take all their advice, and something that Mike Fluitt said to us that we actioned immediately was, he said one of the best things he did was to speak with every one of his customers at the start of McLaren to find out what it is they really wanted. Maybe it was a little easier for Mike in those early days. McLaren, of course, wasn't as big as it is today. So we had to do a cutoff point. But in the first sort of month or so of launch of Longbow back in March last year, when we came out of stealth, we picked up the phone and we, I say interviewed, but I guess it probably felt like an interview for them. But we spoke to around 200 of our earliest reservation holders and asked that question. What do you want from Longbow, both in terms of a car and also an experience? So hearing their voices and then writing that down and kind of working towards it, I think that's what also mitigates some of that risk we started talking about, because we know now quite clearly we're building what our customers actually want. And I wonder how many car companies, or companies in general, actually really understand what does their customer want to see, feel, experience, not just in the product, but in the process and from the company as well in their products. I would hazard a guess that a lot of companies, if we take maybe BYD, one we know quite well as an example, they're fairly distanced from their customers because they bought out the Yangwang U8, which is an SUV that, of course, manages to float itself across a river or a swimming pool. I don't know what kind of marketing thought group they put together to come up with that one, how many customers are really asking for that, but they built it anyway. And so for us, actually, our spec sheet is built off of what our customers have told that they want us with, of course, still our direction. Because I think if you end up just taking in what everybody tells you, you end up with the Homer Simpson car, right? Where it has all sorts of things on it that nobody really wants, or one person needed it to do a 14,000 kilometer journey and carry 17 people, right? We're very still clear on exactly what we need that car to be, because it's come from passion from us as well and understanding the market.
And what are those customers telling you? Like, what are they saying that Longbow can deliver that they can't get through, name a company?
Surprisingly, first of all, it's give us less, actually, in the car, in the product itself. I think everyone has really bought into our vision of what should a super lightweight sports car be today. And it's a car that is unencumbered by what most people think electrification is today. And we forgive everybody, because electrification has been sort of combined with autonomy, with big screens, with all these distractions. But that's not actually what electrification is, right? If you just take the drivetrain alone, what it is super high torque, lots of power, low weight, the perfect kind of thing you would want to stick into a sports car. So get rid of those distractions and focus on delivering that, but also delivering an experience around the product, which is why we have the guilds, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, you're no one needs, we run electric sport. No one needs an electric sports car, right? They want one. No one needs a sports car or hypercar. They want one.
Yeah.
Right? If everyone's driving the car they need, then everyone would be driving a 20-year-old Toyota Corolla, right? That's the car
Yeah.
you need. And
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
that's probably too big for most people, right? Like a smart car, that's what you need, right?
Yeah.
So the delta between what you need and what you want is how you create desirability, right? And I think some companies feel, and you actually said that Elon's view is you build a better car and people want the car, but that's because he doesn't get it. Because like Ferraris aren't better cars, right, on any measure, unless beauty, which is a subjective measure, right? So one is a product, and you have to build a great product, right? If you build a NAF product, you can still have raving fans, but there's just gonna be less of them, right? Because they're more niche. Loads of people love the Renault Twingo. I'm not one of them. So beauty and a great product is important, and it's a multiplier, right? It's a force multiplier of a really compelling brand proposition and a journey and a relationship and a story, right? That's what people are buying. Like that's what people are buying into. And so the one side is focusing on a great car, what we do there. The other is how do we make a relationship with Longbow more than just a car, and that's the guild. So we're still early on with this, but we've ran a couple of guild events now. They've been packed out. Customers come and see us. They want to be part of the journey. We give them extra things there. We bring in extra speakers, and they're always great. And we will continue doing more of that. We'll continue rewarding customers, one, for believing us early on, involving them in the journey, like how they built the car, how they give us feedback, but also just bringing like-minded people together. Because if we can have people in the car who in the room who are massive raving kind of climate supporters, and we could probably have climate deniers in the room as well, but they both love cars, right? And they both bind around the beauty of it, and they can find commonality in it. And I think that's a beautiful thing, right? When you can create a community, you can create a brand that brings people in, and ultimately we want to build beautiful cars that are great to drive, and that are different from those other cars in the market, right? It's simple, and a lot of people buy into that.
It's interesting because when you go and you park an electric vehicle to charge, right? You would think that there was this camaraderie between all of the cars that are charging there. And I used to own a Harley Davidson. So I experienced, in a Jeep at one point, there's like the Jeep Wave, this community that builds around that. And I was like, oh, well, Teslas, we all are sitting here at this, charging station. Nobody talks to each other. In fact, I think they go out of their way not to make eye contact in that process. And I was like, what a shame, that there's not a community kind of built around this. But as you indicated, I think that, at some point they stop listening to the customers. Um, how?
Quantify that. Here's the way Elon specifically quantify that.
Yeah.
There you go. Not
Yeah.
listening, right? If you
Yeah.
can't quantify, how does that make more money or sell more cars? It does. We can probably figure it out, but you can't quantify that thing if you're viewing through that lens, right? It's super hard to quantify unless maybe you're Ferrari, who have a higher multiple than Tesla,
Yeah.
and they're sold out 2 years in advance. So there is value to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about the guilds. What's I know you guys had launched at CES. I'm apologize that I could not make that event. I really did want to go, but I just gotten back. How was that? Was that part of your kind of launch in the US through the CES event? And was that one of the guilds that you brought guild members together?
Yeah, I mean, yes. So we felt that before we showed the car at CES, we should show the car and guild members should be able to see it first. So we created an event that allowed our guild members to be rewarded for being reservation holders and supporting the brand. So it was a great event. We did it in a photo studio. It was really cool. We had even people flying in from the UK so we had Americans and Canadians flying into the UK for our launch and vice versa because they just wanted to be a part of it. So great community, really great people together. Yeah.
Amazing. And what was the reaction? What did they say? How did they feel?
they're still guild members. So I guess it was
nobody canceled their order.
No, it was really good. Yeah, I think surprisingly, there are a lot of people there who were there because of the journey we're on as founders and the journey we're on as a company. They love the car, they love how it looks, they like the stats, but actually for them, they wanted to be a part of the journey, and they really bought into what we're doing as founders. So that was, I think we're very British, so we think that we're not important. Our journey, our story is not important, but it is quantitatively important based on a couple of conversations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what was that? What's the origin of Longbow in terms of the name? Was that a joint decision? It's always interesting. I have a co-CEO at Bloom, and kind of as you develop, you kind of find your rhythm with each other as co-founders. So let's walk through that a little bit. What's the origin, and then how do you guys divide and conquer on the stuff that needs to get done? I'm sure there's no shortage of things that need to get done at the company. But let's start with Longbow. What's the name?
Mark.
Thank you, Daniel. You see, Gary, how it works? It's always politeness. We're always in sync, and we really were with the branding as well. Look, I think first of all, Longbow didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't one of those sort of serendipitous moments of inspiration or spark. Dan and I have been talking about this for sort of 5 or 6 years now, and then we started, in fact, in stealth, and we were called Ether. There is a story behind that, but we wanted to actually remain stealth for as long as possible, because we have a real belief that you're not a car company until you've delivered cars to customers, because there are too many others out there that have maybe made a name for certainly the automotive industry. I'm sure it's the same for others as well, where maybe pretty pictures of something are shown and a big promise is made, and then tens of thousands of $50 reservations are placed upon a product, and then people, let's take the Tesla Roadster for an example, people putting $250,000 down on that car 7 years ago, and maybe only learning about what that might be on April the 1st of 2026. So we wanted to take a different approach. So we set up Ether, which is the sort of the fifth element. And that fifth element, when you combine earth, water, fire, air, bringing those together, the thing that binds them all together is ether. And so what we took from that is the most important part in all of this is, whilst the car is going to be made up of all those different elements of beauty, of power, range, performance, it's the emotion and the human in the middle that brings all those things together and makes it something special. So that was why it was Ether. It also meant that we could come from the ether when we came out with Longbow in March of last year, 25. And Longbow really is, it's about the power that comes from something that was made in the UK. Look, we're very passionate about UK manufacturing. We genuinely believe it's the best place on earth to build a lightweight sports car with all the people that are super talented in the industry. There's a reason why 9 out of 10 Formula One teams are all based in the UK. Supply chain, all these reasons. So UK is the best place to build a lightweight sports car. But the Longbow was a weapon that was used really to defend against the French and the Napoleonic invasions. And the way that we work there is that the bow is an amazing tool, but it's nothing without the archer. So it's when those two things are combined, the skill of the archer and the skill of the craftsman that built the bow, those coming together create something incredible that can fight back nations. And so we take that analogy into the vehicle, that we've got this British crafted vehicle, but actually it's all about the driver, and it's that skill that comes into it. So again, kind of moving away from screens, autonomy, and a disconnect from the experience, and putting the driver first. It also gives us a great opportunity to give the Longbow symbol as well to the French. But I'm not sure if the American audience really understands it. So a slight bit of education. when we do this as the British to the French, it's all about how they used to cut the British bowman's fingers off so they couldn't use the longbow. So the British used to signal that to the French when they won a battle to show that they've still got their fingers.
I always wondered where that came from. Now
There you
I
go.
know.
So if anyone sees us doing that in photos, we're not being rude. We're calling out our heritage and our name.
I love that. So what is it about the UK? I have recently, in fact, that's where we met, right? On a random yacht trip in the in the middle. What is the
Make
Isle
it
of
sound
Wight?
very bougie, Gary.
Yes, I know, I know.
It rained.
Not an ordinary day for sure. But what is it about the UK that makes it uniquely positioned to kind of bring Longbow to life? And did you guys learn that through kind of your experience in launching cars in those markets?
I'll go first on that. I think the value of people is so underestimated nowadays in automotive, in AI, and all of this, right? Even at Tesla and business we worked in. Um, if you look at most sports car companies and you look in the highest levels of a lot of car companies, you'll find Germans and Brits. And if you look at every Formula One team, pretty much, I think apart from two, and even in those other two, a lot of the team, the crew are British. If you look at the top tier suppliers for most hypercars and sports cars, a lot of them are British, and engineers. So it literally is in our blood and our DNA and in the people in the UK, this heritage of automotive. And nothing is more British than the lightweight sports car, because that's where it kind of all came from. Coach building and marrying that with engine builders and engineers. So I think if you look at the DNA of the country, we've always, even if we haven't always had the best cars, right, in certain areas, certainly when you look at motorsports and when you look at the broader automotive space, the UK has always been really big for it. So you've got the best people. That's the first thing. And a very motivated, very well educated group that tend to be very worldly. So you've got such a great basis to build the company there. And also, the UK is a big SME market. So, because actually, when you look at small to medium automotive companies, UK is outweighted in how many it has. Right, that's Morgan, McLaren, Aston Martin, Lotus. And even some smaller companies that are part of bigger groups. There's a lot of smaller companies in the UK that have smaller suppliers, a smaller supply chain, versus the US, right, where it's go big or go home. Even Germany is go big or go home nowadays, right? Japan's the same. China's absolutely the same. So you got great people, a great supply base. You got a great history of being able to build lightweight sports cars. That's it, right? And then great innovation when it comes to EV. So
Yeah.
all of the right components you need are already there. We just need to pick them off the shelf and then shake them up and point them in the right direction and make sure they're glued together. That's our role. If we're doing this in any other country in the world, you'd have to build that from scratch. China doesn't have the SME supply base for high performance sports car parts.
Yeah.
Right? They don't have the skill set. No one's ever designed it or built it there. You can find most engineering consultancies in the UK have worked on 3 or 4 sports car, hypercar, race car programs. So it is such a great place to build it.
And it was
So,
the location for the first sports car, like the Tesla, the Roadster, was built in the UK as well. So out of
really?
Hethel from Lotus, they put together those 2,500 vehicles and then sent them to America. A lot like happened with AC and the Shelby Cobra. Again, that was a UK built car that got sent to America and had its sort of crate motor put into it. So there is a history of that. And also, our weather is so terrible that we really enjoy sports cars for the 4 or 5 days of the year that the sun comes out. We can enjoy them. So we're very passionate.
So, Mark, are you telling me that the Shelby, that great American brand, is not American at all? Is that, are you shattering my dreams here? Is it?
Once it got those big stripes and that big V8 overpowered engine in it, it certainly became American. But yes, it has its British roots for sure in the tiny little steering wheels and the small wheelbase and everything that was small in the car. That's us. Everything that was big, you guys.
Yeah. I love it. So as I was reading on Longbow and kind of some of the innovations that you guys are bringing, that supply chain piece, I think is one of the biggest in terms of being able to take already manufactured parts and kind of assemble them. I'm assuming that reduces some cost. It also reduces some risk because the parts are kind of known quantities. There's some other parts that you're also doing in 3D printing of the vehicles. I've been watching this kind of happen in the dual defense space where 3D printing of drones and on demand. Walk me through that, because that seems to be you know, I can imagine. I don't know if this would be the world that Longbow would live in, but if I had a Longbow and there was a part, I might be able to 3D print it either myself or through a local 3D printing shop, be able to do that. Walk me through the vision there, and what's the innovation on that side?
Split this one, Daniel, perhaps, but you're right around the ingredients that's required to build a great car, but also a successful car company. Often, when it comes to sports cars and hypercars especially, they are created usually by either singularly wealthy individuals or by a consortium that come together and say, I want to build this because it's a passion project and I want it to be the greatest thing in an XYZ category. And what you can end up doing there very, very quickly is you can spend a couple of $1 million just designing and homologating a single repeater indicator or headlight unit. And that kind of approach, sure, it will result in maybe one or two very beautiful cars, but it certainly doesn't a production vehicle make. So really, what you should be doing, as many manufacturers do, they just hide it very well, is use components that have already had millions of miles of testing, that have had hundreds of millions of dollars spent on them already, and then bring them into a unique way into the vehicle. And so to be very clear with what we're doing at Longbow, we're not waiting for any new or future technology to come along for us to be able to build the cars. We are building them. We built one, in fact, faster than I think anyone else perhaps has in history, certainly that we're aware of, going from our blank sheet showing our vehicle in March through to actually showing a fully driving vehicle in October of last year. So 6-7 months. And that's because we're super, super dedicated on what the car needs to be and how to build it, rather than running off on some sort of folly to spend millions of dollars of investors or our own money on a headlighting unit that isn't required, because the supply chain is really, really strong.
Yeah, vanity versus sanity, right? and your, how you build and how you think about cars is super important. And we looked at this kind of concept of circularity, but reject it because circularity implies you've died and then you need to bring it back into circulation. So from the beginning, we don't want the car to die. So we talk about the 100-year Accords, which is we want the car to be on the road in 100 years' time driving. So it needs to be beautiful because ugly things aren't on the road in 100 years' time. Or if they are, it's because they're ugly and they're celebrating it. So beauty is timeless. So it needs to be timeless beauty. But then the point you've talked about there's such an opportunity of additive manufacturing that others are afraid of. It's still relatively nascent, but there are so many parts of the car that you can print. And then you create a blueprint of that part. And then for 100 years and beyond, that part can be printed. And we support that as an OEM. So our role isn't to try and squeeze as much money as we can out of customers in after sales. That's ludicrous, right? Like even Apple don't do that. They want the products to survive because then more people will buy it, right? Your natural product life cycle means people are going to buy a car every 5 years, right? And if we have retention, 80% retention or 90% retention every 5 years, then we just need to work on the difference, right? And you do that by building great products. Fundamentally, if the car's on the road, if the components are still on the road, And then actually what you can do is if a part fails, you can shred it and print it again. So you can reincarnate a part if you envisage that with 3D printing. And then your iteration loops, you don't have to go and speak to suppliers. You can build exactly what you need and print it. So your supply chain's smaller, your footprint smaller, after sales is easier, right? If something breaks, then the workshop can print the part versus ordering it. So it all has a, I'm shocked that other manufacturers aren't doing this, right? Because we're able to do it. And therefore everyone's able to do it. They're just not.
Yeah, I love that idea. Just because at one point, in my Harley journey, my dad has Harley Davidsons, and some of these bikes, they because they don't produce the parts anymore, you really can't. If they break, you can't fix them. And so it becomes something that it would just sit in your garage, or you have to sell it to someone that has those extra parts. And I was just thinking about the long term. What an amazing thing to know that, hey, there's a part and it can be 3D printed, maybe not yourself, but you can go into somewhere and that lives forever. What a safety feeling of safety that might bring to your customers to say, hey, like, you're going to use a car, things are going to break in cars, they're driven, but the ability to have that as a resource, I think would be incredibly valuable to your customer base. I don't know if they've said that to you or indicated that, but I was just thinking long term. That's got to be a beautiful thing for your customers.
Something they have shared is the two other benefits of it, really. One is customization. So with that ability to have that part that can be 3D printed, let's say it's a piece of the dashboard area, right? You now have the ability to customize that to an individual taste, which is something that large OEMs simply can't do because they're stamping out all of these parts. And there's something else other large OEMs can't do. Like Tesla's a great example. They were making so many changes and iterations to the product as it was going down the production line. And it's laudable, as they should, right? If there is a better way of doing something that improves the product, we shouldn't wait, as other large OEMs do, for a 3 or a 5 year renewal of that product. And I think we're all fed up of that now, of a facelift coming, and you're having to wait for all of these adaptations or improvements to arrive. Tesla said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to make adaptations on the fly. And there were literally at some point hundreds of changes, physical changes made to the vehicle every week going down the production line. But can you imagine the nightmare that creates with storing parts in service throughout the history? You now have one car, but that one car actually has 400 different iterations of that one part. You now have to store 400 single dashboard components just so you can make sure that 1 year or 1 week of manufactured vehicle can be supported. So for us, it really allows us to scale much faster and at a much lower capital expenditure as well, and allows us to work with partners and expand into new markets far quicker. And that's why, Gary, talked about how you wouldn't build an automotive company today, even how Tesla did 20 years ago, because there are just these opportunities that you can now adopt.
It's amazing. I really love the long. I want to look up your 27 principles. Oh, I absolutely love that. So we'll put a link in the notes on where to go find those. But where did this? I mean, you guys both sound really passionate about cars, and I got to imagine that started somewhere earlier in life. What was it about cars? I mean, is it just cars in general? Like, you guys have spent a career in this industry. How did you get there?
You can go first,
For
Mark.
me,
You got, yeah.
I'll try not to go on for too long, Daniel, because this is a father story, Gary, like you started our call with. So it often leads back somewhere, doesn't it, to the acorn to the tree. But for me, apart from Dad taking me along to a racetrack one day and seeing this car, and he looked at it and his mouth dropped, and I thought one day I want to do something that kind of has that impact on Dad. Apart from that, I just loved taking things apart as a kid. And so as early as I could, I bought a motorbike. My parents didn't agree, but it was fine because I had pulled it apart within 12 hours of owning it, pretty much, just to understand how it all worked. And so it's that taking things apart, understanding, and then even at that stage, when I studied engineering, my whole sort of thesis is around removing as much weight or unnecessary bracketry as possible. I think Colin Chapman has often been quoted saying that the best bracket is no bracket at all. And so that whole passion for cars, loving speed, loving a little bit of danger, loving the beauty of cars and seeing how they've transpired over generations and wanting to leave something beyond my lifetime, that combined with the engineering piece, it probably all very neatly converges in one diagram with a big part here at Longbow in the middle.
I love it. Has your dad seen the car?
I feel like there is either a therapy session that's required or a different podcast where I talk about how you put this effort into, wow, one day I'll be stood there and I'll be able to show Dad the car that I built as as little 11-year-old Mark, and it's like, that's cool, nice. So yeah, he likes it. It's cool. So yeah, now it's on to maybe doing things for myself and setting up floors for my sons and daughters to try and work their way towards in their life.
Love it, man. Yeah, Dani, where did your love for cars come in? I mean, has it always been there?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, so my dad was a soldier, so we couldn't afford sports cars, let alone hypercars. So always collected models, like Burago models, had a wall full of photos and cars most people haven't even heard of, Zagato Raptor, all these like obscure, beautiful cars. And then and I had friends that we were obsessed with it, so playing top trumps all the time. And then actually, then this is a child memory as well. My dad once picked me up from school because I was in boarding school on a Friday, and he got an Audi TT, and he'd bought it, and he wanted to surprise me. So he was there. He'd never picked me up from school ever. This was the only time to show off a car. And two, he was there with an Audi TT. And at the time, in my circle and where we were, Audi TT was like the nicest car anyone was driving around in. I just remember driving around and just playing with the Bose sound system, and a Bose sound system in a car. Whoa. So I think this cars for me have always been almost unattainable, but I've always loved them. And then as going through the career now, getting to a point where we able to build it, it's also why we priced the car at £65,000, right? Because £65,000 is it's not cheap, but it's attainable, and hypercars aren't. It's just not. It's gratuity. It's like throwing red paint on a fur coat and then showing everyone it's gratuitous.
Yeah.
But building something that people can afford and drive that is really that's important for both of us as well, right? So yeah, cars are, and then the first car I had, just the freedom, right? Driving around, listening to music and not having just aimlessly driving has always been something that I've always loved, the freedom with it. So
yeah,
having a distraction-free car that's just there for you to drive and enjoy the spirit of driving is really important for us.
Oh, I love that. There is something about, I think one of my favorite cars that I've owned was a BMW Z4 convertible. I was in Southern California at the time, and there was nothing like just putting the roof down and just going for a drive, and just kind of experiencing the world through the car. And so when I look at your car and kind of see what you guys are building, it reminds me of that feeling you get, with, just driving. Driving's fun. I have an 18-year-old son who's just started driving, and, you kind of, as an adult, you kind of lose that. Like you drive all the time and it's for necessity, but that 18-year-old feeling of, loving to drive and the freedom that gives you is just really cool. And I get that feeling every time I see your car. So that's really, really cool. What was your first car? I'll tell you mine as you guys think about this. I had a blue, it was already 10 years old, Nissan Sentra, no radio in the car. And I don't think the heat worked exactly right. We were in North Carolina. It had hubcaps that fell off every once in a while when you go over the trade tracks. They'd fall off. But that was it was got me everywhere I needed to go. That was my very first car. What was yours?
Go on, Mark. You got a bet.
Oh, I have a story. I've told it before, and it didn't go down very well because it's quite niche. But I think that just on that part, right, of it did everything you needed to do, and that sort of freedom piece. The second car I had, I bought on the way back from university. I want to say bought on the way back from university. I literally was driving back in a taxi, had all of my bags, and stopped off at the place where I was going to buy the car, and bought it and put all my bags in that car and drove it home on a loan that I probably couldn't afford at the time, but I had to have it, and it was a Lotus Elise. Mum and dad, once again, super proud, coming home from university with all these bags in a sports car. I had to make that car work for everything, right? That had to do me now for the next 5 years of commuting, of any travel I wanted to do. It wasn't just sort of high days and sunny days. So I think building that understanding into what we're doing with the Speedster and the Roadster, I guess a little bit less so in Speedster, unless you are in California. It doesn't have a roof, so maybe you couldn't use it every day in the UK. But trying to make a sports car that isn't just something that's a toy that can be used all the time is really important for us. Especially considering my first car was basically a rebranded by Seat Fiat Panda that was blue and had denim interior and a hammock for its rear seats. But I think the less said about that, the better. If you're really interested in those cars, hit me up, mark@longbowmotors.com, and I'll tell you all about how great those things are and how you can modify them.
I had a Golf GTI Mark III
Okay.
in dragon green, and still regret that I got the 8 valve, not the 16 valve. And it was £800. And there was a reason for that, because I had to do so much work on that car, which I loved. And the very first thing I did was go out and buy new wheels from I went to a local scrap heap and found wheels that worked on my car that were better, so that it didn't have but I still love that, Rolf the Golf. I've named every car. It's Rolf the Golf was my first car. Yeah.
Nice, nice. I think there's something to naming your vehicles. It gives you some personalization to it. Well, guys, we started with looking at something crazy like building an electric car company, and you guys are doing that. You're in the process of customers taking delivery here shortly. You've shown the car. What keeps you going through as this process? You guys are co-founders. I know that's always an interesting, but in the dark moments where everybody is looking at the 50 empty chairs and you guys are seeing, the audience full of people, what keeps you going between the two of you?
That seems to be the hardest question you've asked us yet, Gary, hasn't it? Yeah, staring at 50 chairs. If something is worth doing, it's going to be hard. I think something I've said too many times to people recently is that you can't have a good character and an easy life. And I think certainly the path that we've chosen building this car, whilst we know exactly how to do it and it's a process, there are always things that come along that surprise you along that path. And I think it's certainly having other people around you to do that with makes a huge difference. I have a huge amount of respect for anyone doing any project solo, because you are going to have good days and you're definitely going to have some down days. And I think being able to have someone else there that actually understands what you're going through and is going through the same thing makes a huge difference. So you haven't asked me for any advice, and nor maybe should people. But if anyone ever was about launching any company, it would be, if you can, do it with someone else that also has similar passion, because you can go pretty far alone, but you can go much, much further with someone else. That's my little love letter to you there, Daniel, I guess.
I was going to say, it did sound like a love letter. It was. I think he likes
my
you, Daniel. I don't know.
No, it's I think that is absolutely so important, because we're building a car for both of us. We both want a car. Um, and I think there's part of it is what motivates you, what drives you forward, but I don't necessarily think that, because that can be quite ephemeral, because that can change. I think your mindset going into it, so we'll never quit. We'll continue going for, I have a thesis, which is, and this is against Marx, right, is success is just energy multiplied by competence multiplied by time, right? So and the time element is what people run out on, right? Because they'll run hard at something and they're good at it and they'll do it for 3 weeks and give up. We've been doing this for nearly 6 years now, if you exclude all the heartache at Tesla. So just continuing every day, doing the most you can do that day. And some days it's a washout, right? Because other stuff comes in, hits you from the side. And some days you're flow state and you're crushing it. So, you showing up every day, solving the problems, continuing to move forward, never admitting defeat, and just working towards that end goal and objective. That's how you're successful, right? Because it's always longer than you think. It's always harder than you think. And there's always challenges you never anticipated.
Yeah, I have experienced that. I know every entrepreneur out there who's trying to do something, goes through that roller coaster. And for me, I love what you said about talking to customers, because that's where I find myself being grounded. When I'm having a tough day, or things, just kind of the working on the business versus in the business. When I'm talking to customers, I just feel more grounded. It's like, okay, this is why I'm doing this. This is making a difference for the people. Uh, them getting excited about what you're doing energizes you as a founder. I just encourage everyone who is starting, don't lose sight of that. I think, when they teach about, doing 100 discovery calls, and you talk to customers, it's like this, finite period of time. But I think if you do it right, you never lose that. You always keep that, customer obsessed, customer focus as part of your DNA. And I love to see that you guys are doing that at Longbow. Um,
We also,
last,
whilst we're saying we never give up, Gary, something that always comes up for us as well is that we're also never happy. And I don't think it's happened so many times where we've done a thing and people come, oh, you must be very happy, or, isn't this great? And I think everyone feels that maybe we're just incredibly miserable people, but because our response always is, no, we did what we wanted to do. We've achieved that, but we're focused on the next goal or objective. So yeah, it's very difficult to be happy or satisfied in what you're doing. And I don't necessarily say that out loud as a bad thing. I think if you are ever happy or satisfied with what you've done, you've lost sight of the next bigger or more exciting objective, or the thing that you can do next. So yes, we're never happy.
Well, and
speaking,
I think, I had this conversation with a friend once, a colleague, and it was, oh, you don't seem to be enjoying your work. And I was like, if I'm only working when I'm happy, right, that's a very finite fuel. So if you're able to, despite how you feel, like come to the court and be on court, then you can draw power from the ether, right? You're not just waiting for this finite emotional state of productivity. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They say every discipline, like going to the gym, or if you wait till you want to do it, you're never going to want to do it. More times than not, right? And so just having that discipline to keep going, keeping that North Star. And I do think, like you said, Mark, having a partner to share that with is incredibly helpful, especially one that understands kind of like where you guys are at. Being an entrepreneur can be a lonely thing. Even though we were making fun of the yacht experience, I was thankful that Larry put that together, because getting around other entrepreneurs and kind of hearing their stories, and just the things that you can only share with somebody else, like you're watching the burn of your cash, you're watching all the things that are going wrong, and it's nice to get around other people and say, yeah, I went through that, and this is what happened, and here's how I got through it, and just having that ability to be vulnerable and share those things with people that really understand what you're going through, I think is, incredibly valuable experience. And that's how I met you guys. Honestly, we met on the boat. So,
I'm not trying to paint a miserable picture here either, right? I mean, like every day I wake up, I'm super fortunate to be working on something that I believe is meaningful, and something that I want to do, and something it seems other people want to see in the world as well. And that there is nothing better than being able to wake up and go, okay, I'm working on something that I actually want to work on, and it's meant to be shit, right? It is meant to be. Ask anybody that's even just doing something they don't want to be doing, is their life great? No, they're going through shit too. So you may as well plow through that shit doing something you really believe in. So no, look, super, super grateful to be able to do it for sure.
So what's next for Longbow? What's the next year? What are the big milestones?
Cars on the road, right? That's what we're here for. So we are here to deliver cars, and our mission is rapidly make all cars lighter and better for people on our planet. It's not design them and then never build them, right? So this year we start deliveries. We're going to be showing a lot of things that people haven't seen before from us as a brand this year, and continuing to build the guild, continue to build reservations, and then delivering on promises to customers and promises to investors. That's it. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot in a year. It's a lot.
Yeah. What's any shows in the US?
Yeah, we're going to be busy over the next couple of months. So we hope to be in be able to display the car publicly in LA. And then there are a couple of other events as well that will probably take us into Texas and then back to California over the next few months. So we'll make sure that we share that information with any of our guild members. So anyone that's interested in seeing the car or talking to us, longbowmotors.com, sign up for the updates there, and we'll happily share with you exactly where we're going to be.
Awesome. Daniel, Mark, incredible story. I'm grateful for the time together. I think people will find inspiration in your journey, and it continues. So it's not over yet. More to come. So thank you both for coming on 50 Chairs.
Let's do this again a year's time from now, Gary, shall we?
Absolutely.